My name is Emily. I'm 32 years old, and the night that was supposed to be my father's simple birthday celebration turned into the most terrifying moment of my life. We were halfway to my dad's house when my husband suddenly locked the car doors, his jaw tight, his eyes refusing to meet mine. Then he whispered the words that made my blood run cold. Something's wrong. At first, I thought he was joking, just being dramatic, but the way his hands trembled on the steering wheel told me otherwise. The road he took wasn't the one we usually drive. My heart started pounding as I realized we weren't heading toward my father's home at all. The balloons in the back seat, the cake box on my lap, all of it felt like a cruel cover for something darker. Why was my husband avoiding my questions? Why did his phone keep buzzing with calls he wouldn't answer? And why did my gut scream that tonight wasn't about celebrating my dad at all? Stay with me, because what began as an ordinary family birthday ended with a betrayal so devastating and a revenge so calculated that it changed everything. If you haven't subscribed yet, join us now for more stories like this. I remember waking up that morning feeling almost guilty for being so excited. It wasn't like my dad's birthday was usually a big affair. He wasn't the kind of man who cared for balloons or cake or loud gatherings. He preferred things simple, just family, a quiet dinner, maybe a laugh or two at the table. But this year, I had convinced my husband, Daniel, to come along with me and help make the evening a little more special. We'd gotten a cake, some decorations, and I even picked up his favorite bourbon. It felt good to do something thoughtful, to put a smile on my father's face. At least, that's what I thought the day was going to be about. The drive started off ordinary enough. The late afternoon sun slanted across the windshield, throwing gold on the dashboard. I leaned back in the seat, balancing the cake box on my lap, while Daniel drove with one hand resting on the wheel, the other on the gear shift. He was unusually quiet, but I chalked it up to fatigue. He'd had a long week at work. That was normal. I didn't think twice when he didn't respond to my chatter about how Dad would react to the surprise. But then, something small shifted. It was subtle at first. He kept checking the rearview mirror more often than he usually did. His grip on the wheel seemed tighter, his shoulders stiff. When I asked if he was okay, he gave me a short, clipped, "Yeah, just fine." That answer didn't sit right with me, but I brushed it off. Married life teaches you to pick your battles, and that moment didn't feel like one worth starting. As we got closer to what should have been the turnoff to my father's street, Daniel didn't slow down. My stomach fluttered. "You missed the turn," I pointed out, my voice careful but firm. He didn't answer right away. Instead, his hand reached down and pressed the button that locked all 4 car doors at once. The clicking sound felt louder than it should have, echoing inside the small space. He kept his eyes on the road, jaw clenched, and muttered, "Something's wrong." It wasn't just the words, it was the way he said them. Low, tight, almost rehearsed. I froze, my mind racing to make sense of it. Was it the car? A problem with the engine? Did he see something on the road that I didn't? But no, the car was running smoothly, and the road ahead was clear. "What do you mean something's wrong?" I asked, my voice rising a little with unease. He didn't answer, not right away. His phone buzzed in the cup holder, screen lighting up with an incoming call. I leaned forward instinctively, curious, but he snatched it up and flipped it over, face down, before I could see the name. That's when the pit in my stomach grew heavier. I tried to steady my breathing, reminding myself that Daniel was my husband, the man I trusted more than anyone. We'd been through arguments, financial stress, family drama, nothing that made me believe he'd ever hurt me. Yet something about his silence, the locked doors, the hidden phone call, it all felt wrong. I tightened my grip on the cake box as if it could somehow anchor me in that moment. The car sped past familiar streets, past the exit I knew would take us to my dad's house. Each passing mile was another confirmation that we weren't headed where I thought we were. My voice trembled as I asked again, "Daniel, where are we going?" This time, he glanced at me, just for a second, his eyes dark and unreadable. Then he said, "You'll see." It was only then that I realized this wasn't just a birthday trip. Something else was waiting for me, something I wasn't prepared for. The words "you'll see" hung in the air like a storm cloud, and I couldn't shake the uneasiness creeping up my spine. My eyes darted from the road ahead to Daniel's rigid profile, hoping for some kind of reassurance, but all I found was the same clenched jaw and faraway stare. It didn't add up. This was supposed to be my dad's birthday dinner, nothing more. Why did it suddenly feel like I was being taken somewhere I didn't agree to go? My hands tightened around the cake box until I worried I'd crush it. The silence in the car was unbearable. Normally, Daniel and I filled car rides with small talk, music, or even arguments that fizzled out before we reached our destination. But this silence was suffocating, a wall between us that I couldn't climb over. I tried again, more gently this time. Daniel, you're scaring me. Just tell me what's going on. Did something happen to Dad? My voice cracked at the thought, and for a moment he flicked his eyes toward me before gluing them back to the road. It's not your dad, he muttered, almost under his breath. That answer should have calmed me, but instead it only twisted the knife of dread deeper. If it wasn't my father, then what was it? My mind scrambled for possibilities. Maybe a surprise? A detour to pick something up for the party? But the locked doors, the secrecy, the strange tone of his voice, none of it fit with the idea of a sweet gesture. I pressed again, louder this time. Then what is it? Why won't you just talk to me? His grip on the wheel tightened, knuckles pale against the black leather. Because I need you to see it for yourself, he said flatly. That answer sent a chill straight through me. The phone in the cup holder buzzed again, vibrating against the plastic like it was demanding to be noticed. I couldn't help but glance down at it, straining to catch the name flashing on the screen before. He flipped it over again. I saw just enough a woman's name I didn't recognize. My stomach dropped, and suddenly the questions in my head shifted. Was this about another woman? Was he taking me somewhere to confess? The thought made my chest tighten with a mixture of anger and fear. I wanted to scream at him, demand the truth, but something in his expression warned me to hold back. His face wasn't the face of a man preparing to apologize. It was the face of someone bracing for impact. The air in the car grew thicker with every passing mile. I forced myself to look out the window, trying to memorize landmarks, to ground myself in something familiar. But the scenery blurred into stretches of road I didn't recognize. We were moving further away from my father's neighborhood, deeper into territory that felt foreign. Each sign we passed was another reminder that we weren't turning back anytime soon. I thought about calling my dad, maybe even my best friend, but my phone was buried in my purse at my feet, and reaching for it felt impossible with Daniel's eyes flicking toward me every few seconds. I didn't want to risk setting him off. The man beside me, my husband, suddenly felt like a stranger I had to be cautious around. That realization alone was enough to make my heart pound so hard it echoed in my ears. Finally, I forced myself to ask the question I'd been avoiding. Daniel, are you in some kind of trouble? He didn't answer right away. He just pressed his lips into a thin line and kept driving. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost trembling. It's not me. It's us. The words made no sense, but they carried the weight of something irreversible. My breath caught in my throat as the meaning hung there, unfinished. I realized then that this drive wasn't just about a wrong turn. Whatever Daniel was leading me into had the power to tear apart everything I thought I knew about my marriage. It's not me. It's us. The phrase spun around in my mind like a broken record, and the longer I sat in that car, the more my nerves screamed that I didn't want to know what he meant. I turned toward him, searching his face for a crack, some sign that he would soften and tell me this was all a misunderstanding, but he only pressed harder on the gas. The road stretched out endlessly, a ribbon of asphalt pulling us further away from anything familiar. The locked car doors rattled inside my head like prison bars. My chest tightened, and I tried again. Daniel, please, you're scaring me. Just pull over. We can talk about this. My voice was trembling now, but I didn't care. I wanted out. I wanted to breathe air that wasn't laced with his silence. He didn't stop. Instead, his jaw flexed, and his voice dropped into something cold. Something I'd never heard before. You don't get it, Emily. Stopping isn't an option anymore, not after what I found out. Those words hit me harder than any confession of betrayal could have. Found out? About what? My mind scrambled through possibilities like flipping through a Rolodex of disasters. A financial mess? A family secret? Something I had done wrong? I searched my own memory, desperate to think of what he could possibly mean. But nothing surfaced that justified this strange, almost ominous behavior. What are you talking about? I demanded, my voice louder now, nearly breaking. He didn't look at me. His eyes stayed fixed on the road, his grip on the steering wheel tightening until his knuckles went pale. "Do you really think I wouldn't find out? After all this time?" His voice cracked on the last word, and for the first time I noticed something beneath the anger hurt, raw and unfiltered. My stomach twisted violently. This wasn't about work or money or even another woman. This was personal. The phone buzzed again in the cup holder, and this time his reaction was different. Instead of flipping it over, he grabbed it and shoved it into his jacket pocket as if it were evidence. My pulse raced. I felt trapped, like a cornered animal with nowhere to go. The locked doors clicked louder in my memory, the sound replaying until it almost deafened me. I pressed my palm flat against the cool glass of the window, fighting the rising urge to scream. "Daniel, whatever it is, we can fix it, but you have to tell me what's going on." My plea hung in the air, fragile and desperate. He exhaled sharply through his nose, almost a laugh, but one without humor. "You really don't know, do you?" He finally turned to me just for a moment, and the look in his eyes was something I'll never forget. Pain, betrayal, and a kind of fury that made my heart stop. I shook my head slowly, my throat too tight to form words. The road ahead curved sharply, and he swerved into a side street I didn't recognize. The houses here were older, the kind of neighborhood where the streetlights barely worked and the paint peeled off front porches. Everything about it screamed secrecy, as if this place existed outside the world I knew. Then he leaned closer, his voice low enough that it sent a chill crawling down my spine. "Something's wrong, Emily, and tonight you're going to see it for yourself." The words landed like a hammer, final and terrifying. My entire body tensed, and I realized with a sickening weight that this wasn't just about my father's birthday anymore. This night was about to unravel truths I didn't even know were waiting to be revealed. The neighborhood Daniel turned into felt like another world, far removed from the familiar streets I grew up knowing. My father's house was supposed to be just 15 minutes from where we had started, a simple, direct route I could drive in my sleep. But now, with each passing block of cracked sidewalks and dimly lit porches, I realized we were nowhere near it. The longer he drove, the heavier the air became inside the car. The cake on my lap was no longer a symbol of celebration. It felt like a joke, an absurd reminder that I had stepped into this car thinking tonight was just about a birthday. I wanted to demand he stop and turn around, but there was something in Daniel's voice back on the main road that paralyzed me. That mixture of anger and hurt, the way he said, "You'll see," it wasn't something I could ignore. My mind replayed his words, trying to extract some meaning from them, but the more I thought, the more the fear grew. My husband wasn't a man who played games. He was steady, practical, almost predictable. For him to act like this meant something was deeply wrong, something he believed I was part of, even if I didn't understand it yet. The car slowed as he turned down another side street, this one even darker than the last. My pulse quickened when I noticed we weren't alone. A black sedan idled a few houses ahead, its headlights dimmed but unmistakably on. Daniel didn't seem startled by it. If anything, his posture relaxed slightly, as though he expected it. That unsettled me more than anything else. I gripped the cake box tighter, my knuckles aching, and whispered, "Daniel, please, just tell me where we're going." He glanced at me briefly, his face unreadable, and then looked back at the road. "We're still going to your dad's," he said flatly, but the words rang hollow. The route, the secrecy, the locked doors, none of it matched that claim. My throat tightened. "This isn't the way to Dad's house," I said, my voice breaking. For the first time, he didn't argue. He didn't even try to make an excuse. His silence was worse than a lie. The phone buzzed again in his pocket, and though he ignored it, I caught the faint vibration. It wasn't just one call, it had been several, back-to-back, urgent. Someone was trying to reach him, and he didn't want me to know who. I felt the pieces clicking together in ways that terrified me. His anger, his secrecy, the strange route, it wasn't random. He was leading me somewhere connected to my father, but not in the way I had imagined. I thought of my dad then, his quiet demeanor, the way he always avoided too many questions about his past. There were gaps in his stories, pieces of his life he never shared. At the time, I chalked it up to being a private man. But what if those gaps were hiding something? What if Daniel had uncovered something about him that involved me, something I never knew? The car finally slowed, pulling up to a house I didn't recognize. It wasn't my father's, but I couldn't deny the sinking feeling in my chest that somehow, some way, he was connected to this place. Daniel put the car in park, his hand hovering on the keys, and for the first time he looked directly at me with a mix of pity and fury. "Get ready," he said quietly, "because everything you thought you knew about tonight, it's a lie." The words cut deeper than I expected. In that moment, staring at the strange house on the strange route, I realized my life was about to split into two parts, before tonight and after. The car engine ticked softly as Daniel turned off the ignition, leaving us in a silence that was heavier than the darkness outside. I stared at the unfamiliar house, its blinds drawn tight, one dim porch light flickering as if it might go out at any moment. His words from moments earlier, "Everything you thought you knew is a lie," echoed inside me, making my skin crawl. I clutched the cake box against my chest as if it were some fragile shield, the absurdity of it tightening the knot in my stomach. This was supposed to be my dad's birthday. Nothing about this night made sense anymore. Daniel didn't move at first. He sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the house like he was rehearsing something in his mind. I wanted to scream, to demand he unlock the doors and let me out, but a memory surfaced uninvited, stopping me cold. I was 12 years old, standing in our old kitchen, overhearing my parents arguing in hushed but furious tones. My father's voice was sharp, urgent. "If she ever finds out, it'll destroy her." At the time, I thought they were talking about my mother's health or maybe money troubles, but suddenly, sitting in that car, the memory hit differently. What if it had been about me all along? The thought chilled me, and more fragments of the past began to creep in, things I'd buried or dismissed. The way Dad never allowed me to answer the door if someone came late at night. The phone calls he'd take outside, speaking in a low voice before abruptly hanging up when I appeared. Even his refusal to talk about certain relatives, brushing off my questions with a vague, "It's complicated." At the time, I accepted it as quirks of a man who liked his privacy. But now, with Daniel staring at that house like it held answers, I couldn't shake the feeling that those memories weren't quirks at all. "Daniel," I said softly, my throat dry, "if this is about my dad, you need to tell me." Right now, my voice wavered, but I meant it. He finally turned to me, his expression shadowed by something between anger and sorrow. "It's always been about him," he said, "and about you. You just didn't see it." My chest tightened, my heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. "See what?" I asked, the words barely more than a whisper. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his jacket, pulled out his buzzing phone, glanced at the screen, and muttered, "Not yet." Then he shoved it back into his pocket and got out of the car. The locks clicked again, and my side finally released. I sat frozen for a moment, the weight of his words and my own memories colliding into a storm of dread. Then I stepped out, my legs unsteady beneath me. The night air was damp and heavy, carrying the faint smell of smoke from a distant chimney. I looked at the house again, its dark windows watching us like eyes. Every instinct screamed for me to run, but another memory held me in place. My father's face on the day of my wedding. He'd hugged me tighter than usual, whispering, "Always be careful who you trust." At the time, I thought it was typical fatherly advice. Now, I wasn't so sure. Standing beside Daniel on that broken sidewalk, I realized that whatever was waiting inside that house wasn't just about tonight. It was tied to the unsettling memories I'd ignored, the pieces of my past that never quite fit together. And the terrifying part was, I wasn't sure I wanted to know the truth anymore. Daniel's footsteps crunched against the gravel as he moved closer to the strange house. I trailed behind him, hugging the cake box against my chest like a lifeline, my mind spiraling with every unanswered question. The street was too quiet, too still, and the weight of the memories I had just unearthed pressed down on me until my legs felt like they might give out. I wanted to ask again what this place had to do with my father, but something in Daniel's expression warned me to stay silent. He looked like a man carrying a secret so heavy it was crushing him, and I was terrified that secret had something to do with me. As we reached the porch, Daniel's phone buzzed again. This time, he pulled it out quickly, turning his back to me as he answered. His voice dropped into a low whisper, but the night air carried fragments of his words. "We're here now, yes. She's with me, no. She doesn't know yet." My heart thudded so hard I almost dropped the cake. The way he said it, "she doesn't know yet," felt like a blade twisting in my stomach. He was talking about me, about something I wasn't supposed to hear, and suddenly the truth felt closer and more dangerous than ever. I took a careful step closer, straining to catch more. His voice was tense, like a rope stretched to the breaking point. "She'll see it with her own eyes. That's the only way. No more hiding." He paused, listening to whoever was on the other end, then said, "If this blows up, it's on him, not me." The words rattled in my chest. Him, my father. I gripped the porch railing to steady myself, the wood cold and splintered beneath my fingers. All the unease I'd felt since leaving the house earlier solidified into one sickening realization. My dad was at the center of this. My mind flashed back to those hushed arguments I'd overheard as a child, to the way he always avoided questions about certain parts of his past. Had Daniel discovered something about him that he wasn't supposed to? And why was I being dragged into it like a pawn in a game I never agreed to play? Daniel ended the call abruptly, sliding the phone back into his pocket before turning to face me. His expression was unreadable, his eyes shadowed in the dim porch light. "It's time," he said simply, like those two words were supposed to explain everything. My throat tightened. "Who was that?" "Who are you talking to?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my effort to sound steady. He hesitated for just a moment before replying. "Someone who knows the truth. Someone your dad's been hiding from you." The world tilted beneath me, and I fought the urge to step back. None of this made sense. Why would my father hide something from me? Why would my husband be the one to expose it? And what exactly was I about to see inside this house that would change everything? Daniel reached for the doorknob, but I stopped him, blurting out the first thing that came to mind. "Daniel, please. If this is about my dad, if this is about me, just tell me now. Don't make me walk in blind." My voice cracked at the end, and for a moment I thought he might finally soften, that he might give me the truth I so desperately needed. But instead, he shook his head slowly, almost sadly. "You'll understand soon," he said, "but you have to see it for yourself." The door creaked as he pushed it open, the sound echoing into the darkness inside. My stomach churned and my hands trembled so violently I almost dropped the cake box. As I stepped into the unknown, I realized the whispered phone call wasn't just a secret. It was a warning, and whatever was waiting inside that house was going to rip open the fragile picture of my life in ways I could never undo. The air inside the house was thick, carrying a faint smell of wax and something metallic I couldn't quite place. My eyes adjusted slowly to the dim light, and that's when I saw the candles. Dozens of them, scattered across tables and lining the mantel, their flames swaying in the draft of the open door. They weren't festive, not like the bright birthday candles I'd been expecting to place on the cake in my hands. No, these were solemn, heavy, like the kind you'd find in a vigil or a memorial. The sight sent a cold shiver racing down my arms, and the cake box I carried suddenly felt like the cruelest prop in the world. Daniel stepped ahead of me, his shoulders tense as though bracing for confrontation. He didn't say a word, and his silence made the entire scene even more unbearable. My breath came shallow, my body screaming for me to leave, but my legs carried me deeper into the room almost against my will. The flickering light revealed framed photos scattered across a long wooden table. At first, I thought they might be family portraits, but as I drew closer, my stomach twisted. They weren't pictures of us. They weren't even pictures I recognized. They were strangers, men and women of different ages, some looking like mugshots, others like they'd been taken from old yearbooks or newspapers. I turned to Daniel, my voice low, panicked. "What is this? What's going on here?" He didn't answer. He just stared at the table, his jaw tight, his fists clenched at his sides. I followed his gaze and noticed something else, a single photo placed at the very center of the display, surrounded by the others. My heart dropped into my stomach when I saw it. It was my father. The sight of his face among those strangers made my throat close. I stumbled back a step, nearly losing my grip on the cake box. My father's photo wasn't framed like the others. It was taped hastily, almost like someone had needed to mark him, to connect him to everything else on that table. I couldn't process it. My father, the man who raised me, the man I was supposed to be celebrating tonight, was staring back at me from the center of a display that felt more like an accusation than anything else. The metallic smell grew stronger the longer I stood there, and it wasn't until I noticed the faint red stains on the corner of the table that I realized what it was. Blood. My knees went weak, and I had to grip the back of a chair to steady myself. My mind screamed at me to leave, to run, but I couldn't move. Not when my father's face was staring back at me, tied to whatever dark secret this room was meant to reveal. Finally, Daniel broke his silence. His voice was low, controlled, but laced with something that sounded like rage barely held in check. This is what he's been hiding from you. This is why tonight isn't a birthday. It's the truth, Emily, and it's time you knew who your father really is. I shook my head, my voice breaking. No, that's not possible. My dad, he's not part of this. He's never… I couldn't even finish the sentence. My chest felt like it was caving in, my mind scrambling for explanations. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe someone put his photo there to frame him. None of it made sense, but the terror in Daniel's eyes told me that whatever I thought I knew about my father, it was about to be ripped apart. The candles flickered again, as if mocking me, and I realized with a sickening certainty that the celebration I had been planning was never meant to happen. The room wasn't prepared for a birthday. It was prepared for a revelation. I couldn't tear my gaze away from the photo of my father at the center of that grim display. The wax from the candles dripped slowly down their holders, and each drop felt like another second ticking closer to a truth I wasn't ready to face. My pulse hammered in my ears, and I wanted to scream at Daniel for dragging me here without explanation. But the sound of footsteps from the hallway froze me in place. The shadows shifted, and then he appeared, my father. For a moment, I almost believed this was all some horrible mistake, that he'd walk in with his familiar calm smile and laugh at the absurdity of it all. But what I saw instead was a smile that didn't reach his eyes, a smile stretched tight across a face lined with tension. His hands were shoved deep into his pockets, and his shoulders hunched as if he were carrying a burden far heavier than his frame could handle. When his eyes landed on me, they flickered with something I had never seen before: fear. "Emily," he said, his voice soft but strained. "You shouldn't be here." His words cut me, because this was supposed to be his birthday. I was supposed to be the one surprising him. Instead, it felt like I was the intruder, stumbling into a part of his life that he had carefully kept hidden. My throat tightened, and I held the cake box in front of me like it could restore some normalcy to this nightmare. "Dad, what is this? Why is your picture here? Why are there all these strangers?" He glanced at the table, then back at me, his jaw tightening. "It's complicated," he said finally, the same phrase he had used my entire life whenever I asked questions he didn't want to answer. But this time, complicated wasn't enough. The weight in his eyes told me the truth was far worse than I could imagine. Daniel stepped forward, his voice sharp. "No more lies. She deserves to know." My father's eyes darted to him, and for a split second, I saw anger flare. "This isn't your place," my dad snapped, his voice firmer than I'd heard in years. The tension between the two of them crackled in the air, and I suddenly felt like I was standing in the middle of a battle that had been simmering long before tonight. I looked back and forth between them, my stomach in knots. "Dad, please," I begged. "Just tell me what's going on. I can't take this anymore." He hesitated, his forced smile faltering until it was gone completely, leaving behind only exhaustion. He stepped closer, and for the first time I noticed how pale he looked, how his hands trembled slightly as he pulled them from his pockets. "Emily, there are things about my past I never wanted you to know. Things I thought I could bury so you'd never carry the weight of them." His voice cracked, and my chest tightened. I shook my head, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. "You're scaring me." "Just say it. Whatever it is, I need to hear it." He opened his mouth to speak, but the sound of Daniel's phone vibrating again shattered the fragile silence. The noise seemed to jolt my father, his eyes narrowing as if he knew exactly who was on the other end. His lips pressed into a thin line, and when he finally looked back at me, his eyes were glassy, almost pleading. "Emily," he whispered, No matter what you hear tonight, remember, I did it to protect you." The room spun, the candles flickering wildly as though the walls themselves were listening. My father's nervous eyes and that forced smile burned into my mind, and I realized with terrifying clarity that my entire life had been built on secrets I was about to uncover. My father's words clung to me like smoke. "I did it to protect you." They echoed in my chest, refusing to settle, refusing to make sense. I stared at him, hoping for an explanation, but his eyes slid away, landing instead on the wooden table filled with photographs. That's when I noticed something I had overlooked in the flickering candlelight. Scattered between the frames and taped pictures were a handful of thick envelopes, worn at the edges, some already torn open. My breath caught as I reached for the nearest one, my fingers trembling so badly I nearly dropped the cake box before setting it aside. Daniel's hand shot out as if to stop me, but then he pulled back, watching silently, his jaw clenched. My father, on the other hand, took a sharp step forward. "Emily, don't," he said quickly, his voice strained, almost panicked. That alone made me rip the flap open faster. The paper inside was yellowed, filled with typewritten lines and official stamps. At first the words blurred together, but then one line cut through the haze. "Witness Protection Program Intake Form." I blinked, my heart slamming into my ribs. My father's name was on the top of the page, bold and undeniable. My throat dried instantly as I flipped through the documents, each one painting a picture I couldn't reconcile with the man I thought I knew. My dad hadn't just lived a quiet life. He had been living under an entirely different identity. I looked up at him, my voice barely a whisper. "Dad, what is this?" His shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of him as he ran a hand over his face. "It's what I never wanted you to find out," he admitted. His voice was heavy, resigned. "Before you were born, before your mother even knew me as the man I am now, I testified against people who would have destroyed us all if I hadn't. They promised me safety. They promised me a new life. But they also warned me it might catch up someday." The words rattled in my head like loose glass. Witness protection, testified, new life. It sounded like a crime show. Not the reality of the man who raised me, who fixed my bike when I was 10, who taught me how to drive, who kissed me on the cheek at my wedding. My legs shook as I grabbed another envelope, tearing it open with shaking hands. Inside were photographs, grainy, black and white images of men standing in front of unmarked cars, women caught mid-conversation, buildings that looked like they belonged to another era. On the back of one photo was a name I didn't recognize, written in my father's handwriting, with the word "dangerous" scrawled beneath it. I stumbled back, clutching the envelope. "All these years you lied to me. You let me think we were normal, and all this time you were hiding this." My voice cracked, the betrayal cutting deep. My father's eyes glistened, and for a moment I saw the weight of his regret. "I wasn't hiding it to hurt you," he said softly. "I was hiding it to keep you safe. The fewer questions you asked, the safer you were. That's why I never answered them." Daniel stepped forward then, his voice sharp. "And now she's in danger because of your lies. They're already closing in." My father's jaw tightened, and he turned to Daniel with fury. "You had no right to bring her here. Not like this." But I wasn't listening to either of them anymore. My eyes had locked on another envelope, one that hadn't been opened yet. My name was written across it in my father's handwriting. My stomach lurched as I reached for it, knowing with every fiber of my being that whatever was inside would finally shatter the fragile life I thought I had. The envelope with my name on it felt heavier than the others, as if it carried not just paper, but the weight of every secret my father had locked away from me. My hands shook as I slid my finger under the flap, but before I could pull the letter free, Daniel's voice cut through the air. "Don't," he said sharply, stepping closer. His tone wasn't protective, it was commanding, almost desperate. I froze, staring at him, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw something raw in his eyes. It wasn't just anger or frustration, it was guilt. My father's gaze hardened, flicking between us. "You haven't told her yet, have you?" he said, his voice low but filled with venom. The words made my chest tighten. I looked at Daniel, searching his face for answers, but he dropped his eyes, avoiding mine. "Told me what?" I demanded, my voice breaking. My husband inhaled sharply, his chest rising and falling as if he was bracing for impact. Then he finally spoke. Emily, I didn't marry you by accident. I married you because of this. He gestured to the table, to the photographs, to the envelopes that had turned my world upside down. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. What are you talking about? I whispered, my voice shaking. He rubbed his face with both hands before blurting out the words that shattered me. Your father isn't the only one who's been hiding something. I've known about his past for years. I got close to you because I needed answers, because I thought being part of your life would bring me closer to the truth about what he did. The room spun, the candles blurring into streaks of light as his words hit me like a physical blow. My marriage, the love I thought we had built, the trust I believed in it all collapsed in an instant. I felt sick, bile rising in my throat as I stumbled back a step. You used me? I managed to choke out. Daniel's face contorted with regret, his voice thick. At first, yes. I was angry. I wanted revenge for what happened to my family. Your father's testimony destroyed lives, and I thought if I could get close to you, I'd find proof. But then I fell in love with you. I swear, Emily, that part is real. I shook my head violently, refusing to let the words sink in. My entire chest ached, as though my heart was splintering piece by piece. My father stepped forward, his voice trembling with rage. You manipulated her. You brought her into this mess because of me. Do you have any idea what you've done? Daniel's eyes burned, and for once, he didn't back down. What I've done? You're the one who put us all here. You're the one who lied for decades, who pretended to be some kind of hero while families like mine were destroyed. She deserves to know that. Their voices blurred together, crashing over me in waves of betrayal. I clutched the unopened envelope with my name scrawled across it, my hands trembling so badly I thought I might tear it apart without meaning to. My husband had married me under false pretenses. My father had raised me under a false identity, and I was left in the wreckage of truths I never asked for. I finally found my voice, broken and hollow. Both of you lied to me. Both of you made choices that shaped my life without giving me a say. And now you expect me to just accept this? Tears blurred my vision, hot and uncontrollable. Neither of them answered, and in that silence, I realized the truth didn't just shatter me. It left me completely alone. I stood frozen, my fingers digging into the envelope like it was the only thing keeping me from collapsing. My father's voice and Daniel's confession still echoed in my ears, each word slicing me open. Betrayal from my husband, secrets from my father, it was too much to process. But in the heavy silence that followed, I noticed something in my dad's eyes I hadn't seen before. Beneath the fear and guilt was a flicker of something else, calculation. He wasn't just broken over Daniel's admission, he was planning something. My father straightened slowly, his trembling hands curling into fists. You think you've won by dragging her here, by shoving the truth in her face? He said, his voice steadying as he looked directly at Daniel. You think I didn't prepare for this day? Daniel's jaw tightened, but his silence was answer enough. My father stepped closer to the table, his eyes darting to the unopened envelopes and then back to me. Emily, there are things you don't understand. Things I kept from you because once you know, there's no going back. But I need you to trust me now more than ever. The plea in his voice clashed with the sharp edge of his words. Trust, after everything I had just learned? I wanted to scream at him, to demand why he thought I could possibly put faith in him after a lifetime of lies. But before I could speak, he reached for one of the already opened envelopes and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He held it up, his hands shaking less than before, and I could see rows of names typed neatly across the page. Some had red lines drawn through them, others didn't. My father's voice dropped low, grim. These are the people who betrayed me. The ones who tried to take everything from me before I agreed to testify. I've spent years keeping track of them. Some are gone now, but some are still out there. Daniel stepped forward, fury flaring in his eyes. So this was it? A list? You've been keeping score all these years while pretending to live a quiet life? Do you have any idea how many families were destroyed while you played house? My father's lips twisted into something I couldn't quite name, part bitterness, part triumph. And what about mine? Do you think I forgot how they tried to kill me, how they would have killed her if they had the chance? You think I just rolled over and let the government hide me without making my own plans? The air between them snapped like a live wire, and I felt myself caught in the middle of two men locked in a war I hadn't even known existed. My father's voice grew colder. I didn't spend 30 years looking over my shoulder just to let it all come crashing down now. I knew one day it would come to this. That's why I gathered evidence. That's why I built my own insurance. Insurance. The word made my stomach churn. I realized then that this wasn't just about keeping secrets. It was about control, about revenge he had been carefully nurturing while raising me to believe we were just an ordinary family. I turned to him, my voice barely steady. "Dad, are you saying you planned for this? That all these files, these names were part of something bigger?" His eyes softened when they met mine, but the steel behind them didn't waver. "I did it for you, Emily, to make sure you'd never be powerless, no matter what happened to me." The room spun, the weight of his words pressing down on me like a stone. My father hadn't just been protecting me, he had been preparing me to inherit his revenge. And in that moment, I realized the man I thought I knew, the man I called Dad, was a stranger with a plan I wasn't sure I wanted any part of. The paper in my father's hand shook slightly as he held it out, but his eyes were steady, burning with a conviction that terrified me. I had always thought of loyalty as something pure, something unbreakable between a parent and child, but in that moment, I realized loyalty could be twisted, sharpened, turned into something dangerous. My father's loyalty to me wasn't about love anymore. It was about pulling me into the shadows of his unfinished war. Daniel took a step closer, his voice sharp. "You see what he's doing, don't you, Emily? He's grooming you to carry this, to continue what he started. That's not love. That's control." My father turned on him with a glare so fierce it made Daniel pause. "You wouldn't understand," my dad spat. "You came into this family under false pretenses. You don't get to decide what she deserves to know." Their words clashed around me, but I could barely hear them over the pounding of my heart. My hands gripped the unopened envelope with my name on it, the paper crinkling under the pressure. Every instinct screamed at me to open it, to find out what secret my father had written for me alone, but fear kept me frozen. What if it wasn't just another list of names? What if it was something that bound me to this darkness forever? I remembered birthdays growing up, the way my dad always made sure to buy me a small but meaningful gift. I remembered him teaching me to ride a bike, catching me every time I fell, telling me to trust him. I wanted to hold on to those memories, but they now felt poisoned, colored by the knowledge that everything he did was under the shadow of a life he had hidden. His loyalty to me had been his excuse, his weapon, and now it was aimed directly at me. Daniel's voice broke through my spiral. "Emily, listen to me. I came into this with anger, yes, but I never wanted this for you. He's using you. Everything he's done, these files, these names, it's all about revenge, and now he's making you part of it." His eyes pleaded with me, raw and desperate. "You can walk away from this. You don't have to carry his sins." But my father's voice followed immediately, low and commanding. "If you walk away, you won't survive. These people, these names, they don't forgive and they don't forget. They'll come after me and they'll come after you. The only way to protect yourself is to know everything, to finish what I started." His gaze locked on mine, intense and unyielding. "Loyalty, Emily. It's the only thing that will keep you alive." The room seemed to shrink, the candles flickering wildly as if they could feel the weight of the choice pressing down on me. My husband on one side, begging me not to give in, my father on the other, demanding that I accept the burden of his secrets, and me, caught between them, realizing that no matter what I chose, I was going to lose something: my trust in the man who raised me, or my faith in the man I married. The unopened envelope crumpled slightly in my grip, and I knew it held the answer. Whether I was ready for it or not, the truth was already demanding to be seen. Loyalty had become the weapon between them, and soon it would decide which one of them I would stand beside and which one I would betray. The envelope in my hands felt like it was burning, demanding to be opened. My father's eyes bored into me, urging me to choose him, to inherit his fight. Daniel's voice was still echoing, begging me to walk away before I was swallowed whole. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe, and then, with trembling fingers, I tore the seal open. The paper inside wasn't what I expected. No list of names, no instructions for revenge, just a letter written in my father's handwriting, shaky and uneven. I read aloud before I could stop myself. Emily, if you are reading this, it means the past has finally caught up. I kept the truth from you to give you a life untouched by what I did. But blood has a way of finding its way home. My voice cracked as I scanned further. You are not my daughter by blood. Your real father died because of me, and I have lived every day since trying to protect you from the consequences of that. The room went silent except for the hiss of the candles. My knees nearly buckled. Not his daughter. The words sank like stones in my chest. My father, or the man I thought was my father, watched me, his face etched with grief. Emily, you were just a baby. They were going to kill you too. I couldn't let that happen. I took you in, I raised you as my own, and I swore you'd never know what really happened. I staggered back, the letter crumpling in my grip. The man I trusted with my whole life had stolen me into his. My marriage already felt like a lie, and now even my identity had been ripped away. Daniel's face paled, but his eyes hardened as he stepped forward. Do you see now? He's been lying to you from the very beginning. You were never his to keep. You were part of the fallout. My father's voice cracked with desperation. Don't listen to him. Biology doesn't make a parent. Every scraped knee I bandaged, every night I stayed up with you when you were sick, was that not real? You are my daughter, Emily, no matter what. His hands shook as he reached toward me. But I couldn't move. My heart was breaking in two, torn between the man who had raised me on a lie and the husband who had betrayed me with half-truths. Loyalty, love, blood, all of it tangled into a web I couldn't escape. For a moment, I thought I would collapse under the weight of it all. Then Daniel whispered the final blow. The woman who keeps calling me. She's your aunt. Your real family has been looking for you all along. That's why I started digging. That's why I married you. And she's waiting outside right now. The letter slipped from my hands and fluttered to the floor. The truth crashed over me in waves so violent I could barely stand. My father's face crumpled, his eyes brimming with tears. He knew it was true. He had stolen me, built a life out of secrets, and called it protection. I backed away from both of them, the walls closing in. The candles flickered, throwing shadows across their faces, two men who had defined my life in different ways. Both of them liars, both of them destroyers of everything I thought was real. For the first time, I realized I couldn't choose between them. The only choice left was to choose myself. And as I turned toward the door, one thought echoed in my mind, sharper than any knife. The birthday I thought I was celebrating wasn't my father's at all. It was mine, the birth of a truth I never asked for, and the death of the life I thought I knew. I stood there, my chest heaving, my heart torn into pieces, but something inside me shifted. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't the helpless daughter or the manipulated wife. I was me, broken, yes, but not powerless. My father, the man who raised me on lies, and my husband, who entered my life with an agenda, had both tried to control the narrative of who I was, and in their war, I had been the pawn. But pawns only stay powerless until they realize they can move. Daniel reached for me, his voice soft, almost pleading. Emily, come with me. Your real family is waiting. You don't owe him anything. His words carried the weight of truth, but also of strategy. He still thought I was a piece on his chessboard. My father stepped closer too, his voice trembling. Don't listen to him. Everything I did, every lie I told, it was for you. You're my daughter, Emily. No matter what anyone says, he still believed blood didn't matter, that the years of love could erase the betrayal. For the first time, I saw them clearly, not as protectors, not as partners, but as men who had both used loyalty as a leash. They wanted me to choose, him or him, past or present, lies or half-truths. And for a moment, they thought I was cornered. That was when the power reversed. I straightened, my tears drying into something sharper. No, I said, my voice steady in a way that startled even me. I'm done choosing between liars. I'm not your weapon, Dad. And I'm not your project, Daniel. If either of you loved me, you would have given me the truth from the start. Their faces froze shock, maybe even fear, because for once they couldn't control me with secrets. I bent down, picked up the letter with my name, and slipped it into my pocket. My identity, my past, my choice, it belonged to me now, not to them. Neither of them spoke as I walked toward the door. The night air hit me, cool and sharp, like a baptism into a new life. I didn't know if I was walking toward my real family or walking into danger, but I knew one thing: I wasn't walking in anyone's shadow anymore. And that, right there, was the power reversal. They thought I was trapped in their war, but I stepped out of it. They thought they could write my story, but I picked up the pen myself. So if you take anything from this story, let it be this: sometimes the people you trust most are the ones shaping you with their lies. But the moment you see through them, the moment you stop playing their game, you take the power back. And once you do, there's no going back. Because the truth doesn't just set you free, it makes you unstoppable. Thanks for spending time with this story. If it resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Someone else may need to hear it too. Watch another real-life journey by clicking on the left, and subscribe so you never miss what comes next.